بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Dear students of Organizational Behavior course, today inshallah we will start with a new chapter, chapter number 5, the Perceptual Process. At the previous lectures we started to talk about the individual dynamics. We explain the attitudes and we define it and how it will affect our reaction or our behavior, and also we cover the chapter which is talking about another individual dynamics اللي هي personality, and also how it will shape or reflect our behavior within the organization. And today we will continue talking about other individual dynamics which is affect our behavior and our performance, which is the perceptions. And on the later chapters we will continue also talking about the motivations and so on. Okay, so this chapter it is talking about the perceptual process or about perceptions. The first part of this chapter is talking about the perception, and the next part it is talking about how the perceptions will affect our decision making within the organization. Okay, so at the end of this chapter the students will be able to explain the factors that influence perceptions, describe the Attribution Theory which is related to the perception, explain the link between perceptions and decision making, which is the second part of our chapter, and it is very important. The main idea for this chapter not to define or to know what is the perception or the perceptual process. We wanted to know how the perceptions will affect our behavior within the organization and how it will affect the decision making that we conduct within the organizations. Okay, number 4, to contrast the rational model of decision making with bounded rationality and intuition, which is talk about the different model or methods which used for making decisions, whether it is rational or bounded rational or an intuition, and explain how the individual differences and organizational constraints affect the decision making. Also you should be able to construct the 3 ethical decision criteria, and last describe the 3-stage model of creativity. Okay, so let's start to define what do we mean by perception. Perception can be defined as a mechanism where we interpret and explain or try to understand things surrounding us or situations or events. And according to this perception, we behave or we react or sometimes we issue a judge. And for that reasons we connect in this chapter the perceptual processes with a decision making, because once we make a decisions we focusing on our perceptions and identifying the problem and determine or developing the criteria and the alternatives from our perception. Okay, and of course, as you know that the perception is not only relying on or depends on the perception, also it is depends on other factors such as the attitudes, personalities, and so on. Okay, so we can define a perception in other words. It is a process by which individuals organize and interpret their sensory impressions in order to give meaning to their environment. What we perceive can be substantially different from objective reality. How we perceive or how we understand the situation, sometimes it is different from the reality itself, because we see the situation from one side, from one part, or we analyze it from one part. We focus on it from one side, not from the all sides, or we are not see it as in a comprehensive way. Okay, and we are not analyze it in a comprehensive way from its all sides. Okay, So for that reasons, what we are perceived sometimes it is different from the reality. For example, all employees in a firm may view it as a great place to work because it is contain a favorable working condition, interesting job assignments, good pay, excellent benefits, understanding and responsible management. But as most of us know, it is very unusual to find a universal agreement. Why? Because the employees or the individual's perception is different from one person to another according to the job that they assigned. Okay, why is perception important to study of organizational behavior? Simply because people's behavior is based on their perception of what reality is, not on reality itself. Okay, again, perception, and once we talk about perception here, we wanted to discuss perception and focusing on two dimensions. The first one is our perception or our own perception, and the second one is the real situation. Okay, and how we perceive the situation is different from the situation as it is. Okay, so and if we ask which is going to influence us more, whether our own perception or the real situation, we can say that the reality or in reality, if we are not perceive the situation or understand it as it is or see it as it is, it will not influence the way we behave or react. So here we behave according to what we perceive, and we can say that the real situation is not important as how we perceive the situation. Okay, our perception becomes the reality from which we act. Okay, now we wanted to talk about the main factors that influence our perception. A number of factors shape and sometimes distort perception. These factors can reside in perceiver, object or target, situation. Okay, so the main factors that influence our perception is three main, or there are three main factors which is influence or affect our perception. The first factors which is related to us or the individuals or the perceiver. The second factors which is related to the situation, and the last one which is related to the object or the target we try to interpret or to understand. Okay, and now we wanted to talk about those factors which just influence our perception in more details. The first one, it is the perceiver, or factors related to the perceiver, or factors related to the individual or related to us. The factors which is related to individuals or the perceiver, we can sit here or we can explain it as the individual or related to the individual dynamics which is affect our perceptions of the situations or whatever, such as attitudes, personality, motivations, experience, expectations, and so on. Okay, so when we look at a target, your interpretation of what you see is influenced by your personal characteristics, such as attitudes, personality, motives, interests, past experience, and expectation. And in some ways, we hear what we want to hear and see what we want to see, not because it is the truth, but because it confirms to our thinking. Okay, again, we said that there is some differences between our perception and the reality or the real situation, because we see the situation from our as we wanted to see it. Okay, okay, from one part, from one side, not in a comprehensive way. So this is not the truth. This is not real situation, but it is confirms to our thinking. Okay, the second factor, it is the target or the object that we want to interpret or to understand it. Okay, and once we talk about the target or the object, here we want to focus about the characteristics of the object or the target, such as sound, the motion, the size, and etc. So the characteristic of the target also affect what we perceive, because we don't look at targets in isolation. The relationship of a target to its background influences perception, as does our tendency to group close things and similar things together. The third factors which is influence or affect our perception, it is the context or the situation, and here we want to focus on the circumstances we face, such as the time, the social settings, the working settings, the components of the situations, the light, the location, and so on. So the time at which we see the object or the situation or the event, it can influence our attention, and this will affect our perception. The location, the light, the heat, or the situational factor also affect our perception. Okay, so again, there are three main factors which just affect the individual's perception. The first one, which is related to us or for the individual or the perceiver, and here we want to talk about the individual dynamics, such as the attitudes, motivations, expectations. And the second one, which is related to the object that we wanted to interpret, and here we wanted to focus about the characteristics of the object itself, such as sound, the motion, and the last one, which is related to the situation itself, and here we wanted to talk about the circumstances that we face, such as the time that we see or hear the object or the event, the social settings, the light, the heat, situational factors, and so on. Okay. And now we wanted to talk about person perception, making judgment about others. Okay, here in our chapter we wanted to focus on the perception and how it is influence our behavior or the employees' behaviors, and how we can modify it or change it, and so on. We are not focusing on the perceptual process as itself. We wanted to know how the employees judge things or the job or the company or the supervisors or the others, okay, in order to make modification or changes on those thoughts. Okay, the perception concepts most relevant to organizational behavior include person perceptions, or the perceptions people form about each other. And this is very important within the organization, how the employees perceived their supervisors or their managers, and how the managers perceived the performance or the different situations and events of their employees. Okay, many of our perceptions of others are formed from the first impression and the small cues that have little supporting evidence. Once we talk about the perception, we want to focus on the theories which is related to perception, and the first one, which is the Attribution Theory. Okay, the Attribution Theory, here we wanted to talk about the causes of the individual's behavior, whether it is internally or externally. So attribution theory, it is an attempt to determine whether an individual's behavior is internally or externally caused. Or in another way, according to this theory, we wanted to know what are the main causes of the perceptions, whether it is internal or external factors. Okay, The attribution theory, it is a process which is firstly start with observing the behavior of the employees, then we judge or interpret whether this behavior caused by an internal or external forces or factors. Okay, so our perception and judgment of persons' actions are influenced by assumptions we make about that person's state of mind. Attribution theory, again, it tries to explain the way we judge people differently depending on the meaning we attribute to a behavior. Okay, the internal and external causation, according to what we said before, attribution theory process, we suggest that we start to observe the individual's behavior, then we try to determine whether it is internally or externally caused. Okay, and there are three factors related to the internal and external causation. The determinations depends largely on three main factors. The first one, distinctiveness; the second one, consensus; and the last one, it is a consistency. And inshallah, in more details, we will discuss those three factors in more details later. And now we wanted to know, what do we mean by the internal causes and the external causes of perceptions? Internally caused behavior are those an observer believes to be under the person's behavioral control or another individual. Okay, so internal causes or internal forces for the perception, it is related to the person himself. So it is under the control of the person or the individual, while the external causes or for the perceptions or the forces for the perception, it is related to the surrounding environment, uncontrollable factor of the persons. So externally caused behavior, it is what we imagine the situation forced the individual to do. Okay, for example, if an employee is coming late for a work, if we said that a reason for this late according to the person himself, as because he subsequent oversleeping, or he attend a party over in the midnight, so this is an internal attribution or causes for the factor، لأنها إلها علاقة بالشخص نفسه. هو تأخر لأنه كان يعني حاضر لبارتي لأنه منتصف الليل أو راحت عليه نومة، فهي إلها علاقة بالشخص. But if you attribute his lateness according to traffic, so you are making an external attribution. Okay, فأي causes related to the surrounding environment, it is out of the control of the persons, it is an external causes or attributions. Okay. Okay, so again, in order to determine whether the causes of the behavior is internally or externally, this depends on three main factors, as we mentioned before. The first one is distinctiveness, the second one consensus, and the third one is the consistency. Okay, and what do we mean by distinctiveness? It is referred to whether an individual displays different behavior in different situation. Okay, whether the person or the individuals displays different behavior in different situations. If distinctiveness high, we said that the causes are externally, it means person behave differently in different situations, while if the distinctiveness low, we said that the causes are internally, it means that the person behave in the same manner in different situation. For example, if someone late to show for the work and late for meetings, late for appointment, so here we have a low distinctiveness. Okay, so the causes for this behavior, it is related to an internal factors. It is related to the person himself. هو بتأخر عن كثير من الأمور. بتأخر عن العمل، بتأخر عن تسليم التقرير، بتأخر عن الاجتماعات، بتأخر عن مواعيد معينة. فبالتالي هي يعني behave differently for he is behave with the same manner، يعني بتأخر for different situations. ف this is causes for or we have here an internal causes. It is related to the person himself. But if someone late to show for the work, but he is not late for any meetings, any appointments, here we have a high distinctiveness. It means that the causes here, it is related to external influences. Okay, so here the person behave differently in different situation. تأخر عن الشغل لكن ما بتأخر عن أي تسليم، لا تقرير، عن المواعيد، عن الاجتماعات and so on. Okay, and we wanted to said that the external influences, it doesn't mean only it is يعني factors related or it is caused by the surrounding environment. Of course it is related to factors out of the person's control. Sometimes it is related to the environment or for the individuals. If everyone who faces a similar situation responds in the same way, we can say the behavior shows consensus. So what do we mean by consensus? It is up to what extent this behavior is similar to others or to groups. Okay, so if consensus is high, we can say that the causes are externally, and if the consensus is low, we can say that the causes are internally. So it is similar to distinctiveness. Okay, while the consistency, it means does the person respond the same way over the time? So up to what extent employees are behaving in the same way in similar situations? This is a consistency. And if consistency is high, this we can say that it is related to an internal forces, and if the consistency is low, we can say that the causes are external. It is related to external forces. So consistency, if it is high, so this is related to the individual themselves, or to the persons, or to the employees themselves or herself. It is not related to an external forces or factors. Okay, and now we wanted to ask a question: why we need to know whether the causes relate to internal or external forces? Or in another word, what is the importance of attribution theory? The answer is to know whether we need to change or modify the behavior of the others, enhance our ability to deal with individuals or employees within the organizations. Okay, so if the causes it is related to internal factors or forces, so we have to think about the individuals themselves. While if it is related to external forces or factors, here we have to think about the environment or other people such as managers or colleagues who cause the attributes. Okay. Errors and biases. Sometimes the way we interpret something or situation, we fall in mistakes. And here we have two main errors. The first one is the fundamental attribution error, in which the individuals focuses on internal factors rather than the external one, or they neglect the external forces. Okay. The second one, it is self-serving bias. It is the tendency for individuals to attribute their own success to internal factors and put the blame for failures on external factors. Okay, and if we ask why we consider the fundamental attribution error, it is an error. ليش بعتبرها خطأ? Because we highly blame individuals because sometimes it is out of their control. Okay, so it is unfair to judge the persons in this way. Okay, so when we make judgments about the behavior of other people, we tend to underestimate the influence of external factors and overestimate the influence of internal or personal factors. This is what we call it the fundamental attribution error. Okay, and also the individuals and organizations tend to attribute their own success or to internal factors such as their abilities, competencies or efforts, while blaming failure on external factors such as bad luck or difficult co-workers. And this is related to self-serving bias. Okay, so in the self-serving bias here we wanted to talk that it is focusing on or it is focused in the results of the behavior. Okay, and if we wanted to ask another question, why we consider a self-serving as a bias? Okay, or what is the negative consequences of whether the fundamental error or self-serving bias? As you know, the people, when they look for things or the situations, they are not look for it from all sides or in a full picture. So they have mistakenly of the reality, but they believe or this individual, they believe that it is a real picture from their own perspective. Okay. For that reasons, we consider self-serving as a bias or the fundamental attributions as an error. Okay, and here we have a figure which is represent the attribution theory with the main factors: distinctiveness, consensus, and consistency. And as we said that this process, it starts with the observation of the behavior, then we interpret or judge it, and then we relate those behavior according to the causes, whether it is internal or external. If there is a highly distinctiveness, it is related to an external forces. If it is low, it is related to an internal focuses. And the consensus, it is similar to distinctiveness. If it is high, it is related to an external forces, and if it is low, it is related to an internal forces or for the person himself. While consistency, it is different from them. If it is high, it means it is related to the person himself, or if it is low, it is related to an external forces, whether it is related to the environment or to other individuals. Common shortcuts in judging others. Shortcuts for judging others often allow us to make accurate perceptions rapidly and provide valid data for making prediction. The first shortcuts is a selective perception. And what do we mean by a selective perception? Here we consider things which relate to us or that we believed in. So in judging others, we judge the people who have a common things with us and we appreciate them more. Okay, so or in another way we can define a selective perception. It is the tendency to selectively interpret what one sees on the basis of one's interests, background, experience, and attitudes. Okay, so we can say that the problem here in the selective perception, instead of considering everything about the situation or the object, we show interest in something. So our judgment here is not mature or it is not comprehensive. Okay, so because we cannot observe everything going on around us, we use selective perception. We don't choose randomly. We select, of course, according to our interest, according to our background, according to our experience or attitude, seeing what we wanted to see. We sometimes draw unwarranted conclusions from an ambiguous situation. Okay, selective perception, again, we judge the others for something common according to my interest, the background or experience. So the problem here that we are not considering everything about the situation or our evaluation of those persons, so it is not mature or comprehensive judgment. Okay. The second shortcuts, it is a halo effect, تأثير الهالة. When we draw an impression about an individual on the basis of a single characteristic such as intelligence, sociability, appearance, a halo effect is operating. Okay, so the halo effect here, we are taking just one characteristic into consideration and judge according to it other set characteristics. For example, لو بدنا نحكي انه لو في شخص داخل المنظمة عندي أو شخص معين فعل شيء سيء، فأنا يعني بناء على هذه الصفة ححكي إنه يعني كل شيء حيقدمه هذا الشخص حيكون أيضا بنفس الصفة وحيكون سيء. So here we focusing on or taking into consideration one characteristics and we judge according to it other characteristics. Okay. The third one, it is the contrast effects. And what do you mean by a contrast effects? Contrast effects, it is evaluation of a person's characteristics that is affected by comparisons with other people recently encountered who rank higher or lower on the same characteristics. Okay, so في ال contrast effect, a judgment one person to other who contribute or encounter in the same event or in the same task. بقارن شخص مع شخص آخر، الاثنين مشاركين في نفس التاسك أو بيشتغلوا في نفس الشغلة أو في نفس الحدث. على سبيل المثال في selection process، تمام، which is related to the HR department. لما بدي أختار الموظف، تمام، في هذه الحالة أنا لو قابلت على سبيل المثال 10 أشخاص، أول 5 أشخاص كانوا يعني أدائهم كتير ممتاز، يعني بدرجة 99%، لكن ال5 اللي أجوا بعدهم كانت أدائهم جيد بنسبة خلينا نحكي 85%. فأنا هيك بحكم على الآخرين إنه أدائهم كان ضعيف وضعيف جدا بالنسبة للسابقين. وعلى العكس لو أنا قابلت مجموعة من الأشخاص اللي كان أدائهم يعني ضعيف وبعد هيك أجاني واحد مختلف وكان ممتاز جدا، ففي هذه الحالة برضو حيصير في عندي شغلة بنسميها الكونتراست إفكت. أوكي، فبالتالي أنا يعني بحكم يعني على الشخص من خلال آخرين بيشتركوا معاه في نفس الإيفنت. So a contrast effect, it is evaluation of person's characteristics that is affected by comparisons with other people recently encountered who rank higher or lower on the same characteristics. Okay, so it is related to comparing individuals to other who are contributed in the same task or event. طيب stereotyping إلى حد ما بتشبهها، فيها نوع من الكومباريزون، but في stereotyping it is judgment issued some sort of comparison with others. Okay, فوجه الشبه ما بين contrast effect وال stereotyping إنه فيها نوع من comparisons with others. But so we use others to evaluate the individuals, but we judging the individual according to the social group that the individuals belonging to. فأنا هان بحكم على الشخص حسب المجموعة اللي بنتمي إلها. على سبيل المثال لو عندي في مجموعة من الأشخاص فيهم صفة معينة زي الكذب أو السرقة، فأنا ححكم على أي شخص تابع لهذه المجموعة بنفس الصفة إنه بيسرق أو إنه بيكذب. Okay, this is what we call it a stereotyping. Okay, so stereotyping, it is judging someone on the basis of one's perception of the group in which that person belongs. Okay, we deal with unmanageable number of stimuli of our complex words by using stereotypes or shortcuts and what we call it heuristics to make decision quickly. Okay, so if we have an uncomprehensive thought about others, what is the result? أو بمعنى إنه لو أنا كانت عندي هذه shortcuts about the others or uncomprehensive thought about the others, how it is affected the situation. طبعا of course it will affect our decision or the way that we are making the decision, and it is not providing a perfect solution about the problem.